Today, we're gonna have two ideas fight one another. I believe Africa will be colonized again. He doesn't believe it will happen. Maybe if it will happen. So we're gonna put ideas, discuss, conjecture. You, the viewers, should choose which makes more sense for you. So I will make a case and then we'll come against it and I will demonstrate why I believe this. So the first case I'm making now is that because of AI developments by which African governments are behind will be a cause to why Africa will be colonized. And yes, so Donald, I believe you have heard my case and I want you to, based on what you have researched about AI and all that, why do you think I'm hallucinating?
So, I think to answer the question, will Africa be recolonized, you have to understand why it was colonized in the first place. The first colonization in the 19th century happened because Europe needed labor and raw materials stemming out of the first industrial revolution. They had excess capacity in terms of their industrial production, and they needed more raw materials, but they also needed extra labor. So that informed the first colonization of Africa. Now, when you look at the second industrial revolution, which was the computer revolution, there was no commensurate colonization struggle. And when you look at the third industrial revolution, which is the internet revolution and mobile revolution, there was no commensurate colonial outreach or struggle. So you can see that the advancement of industrial revolutions does not in itself imply, depending on the nature of the industrial revolution. So the fourth industrial revolution, characterized by artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, basically does not require human labor. It automates it away. So you have robots. So what do colonial powers require from Africa? Africa has a young population, which is a huge labor force. By 2050, Africans would make up 1/4 of the human race. These people will basically be out of a job if robots and computers are more capable than human beings to perform jobs. And so what will Africans be needed for? Really nothing in terms of their labor force. So perhaps you could say colonial powers will want their land and resources such as coltan, graphite, and the like. So that could be an explanation to say, to power the AI revolution, you need energy, you need minerals, which Africa has in plenty, and that could drive a colonization drive. And so you can make an argument that Africa may be recolonized because of these resources that it has. The question is, will it be? We cannot be sure, because if we were colonized once and the colonization ended over 60 years ago, we've had something called neo-colonialism and imperialism, but that was also in the context of the Cold War, where you had two powers struggling against each other. The Russian Federation collapsed in 1989. Now we have the US as a sole superpower with China on the rise. Can the US continue to carry out its imperialistic agenda as it has been? We saw that it failed in Afghanistan, it failed in Iraq, it failed in Vietnam. Is the US still powerful enough to go and conquer other places in the world? We're seeing what it's trying to do in Venezuela. It looks like they may not do a very good job of that. And the US is divided internally between the liberals and the conservatives, and so left and right, and it is polarized. It cannot unite on a single agenda to carry out global hegemony. And its power is being threatened by China, which is on the ascendance and is now perhaps the greatest economy in terms of output. And then you have India on the rise with the highest population of human beings of 1.5 billion. And then you have BRICS, India, China, Brazil, South Africa, Russia. So you can see that there's a multipolarism in the world, which is different from the unipolarism we've had with the US or the bipolarism that was there in the Cold War, which makes it harder for any one country or few countries to become true colonial powers in the modern sense. Because again, the ground is shifting. By 2050, Africa will have the youngest population in the world and 1/4 of the world's population. And the US will have shrunk, Europe will have shrunk, and Europe is not as powerful as it used to be. Britain, which was the global power 100 years ago, is now a shadow of its former self. It's even poorer than India, its former colony. So Britain will not colonize anyone. It's not even leading the AI race. France is also falling behind. Germany is also falling behind, the likes of China and India. So the US is the only power that you can talk about in terms of a potential colonizer. But the US is divided, like I said, and is being threatened by ascendant powers like China and India. So perhaps the question could be that maybe China could be a colonizer. We don't know. China does not have a history of colonizing other countries because it was defeated and colonized as well. So China could be, or perhaps India could be. And where does that leave Africa? Is Africa open to be? Well, the question is, at present, Africa's situation is one of weakness, is one of division, fragmentation. You have 54, the African Union says 55 countries in Africa, mostly weak, mostly politically not strong, and economically very uncompetitive, and African leaders do not have a common agenda. So you could say that any serious power could be Eastern, Oriental, China, or Western, or South Asian, India, if they organize themselves to come and do a divide and conquer of Africa, it is possible because Africa is not united, does not have weapons, does not have technology, and does not have a common agenda to defend itself. But will that continue to be the case in the next 30 years? Maybe not. And that's dependent on how our leaders, African people, can organize themselves and have common consciousness to determine their future.
Well, I wish probably if I made my case clearer before I maybe explain my argument why I believe it will be so. Because it's like you saying the future will resemble the past. Because you see how it went in the first industrial revolution, the second, the third, and now you are making an assumption even the fourth will be the same. Well, that's inductive thinking at its core in nature. So, but we have never experienced what you're experiencing now. You have ever had like people like Elon Musk or these people who are leading the AI revolution saying that there won't be any need for people working. And then they're talking about things like universal basic income, whereby they pay tax in these big corporations that are using AI and then they give money to people who are not working. So probably if there's anything I am not understanding, you're gonna, come and show me why. But this is what I'm saying. If a country doesn't have big corporations or source of incomes to be able to feed these civilians or citizens, what happens? Say, like, migration start happening. People start learning out from their countries, going into foreign, like going to Germany or France or maybe USA or wherever they choose to go, if it might be India, whatever. but most likely the Western countries. And then probably these countries can say, okay, we are blocking the borders. Or if they have some interpreted, let's say we are blocking the borders, no one can come in, but people will start dying on their borders. Okay, maybe let's start using forces, as we saw in the southern part of the United States. So these nations, as they see that happening, now they say, okay, people of these countries have come in our land. And the reason why they have come is because their country is not able to feed them. We have food, we have everything. Why don't we use it as an excuse to go and invade this country? You know very well that's a very viable excuse. We come and say, hey, Uganda, we have about 20 millions of people. And we have discussed with them and we have seen it fit that we should feed them on one condition, that we overtake your land and we shall then be able to take over the power and we shall feed your people. Because AIs have been developed in their countries. They have a lot of organizations that they can be able to tax. They can be able to get these UPIs to their people. But you just imagine if it happened in the next 5 years. Where would Uganda get UPIs? Okay, let's say a nation in the UK or Germany choose, okay, we're going to be giving them money to give them. Will they do it for free? No, they will not. They will do it for a specific.
That's a good point that you're making, and we can look at this is not the first revolution there has been, and
they're coming back on the same issue.
It is a different revolution, but it bears some resemblance to others that have happened before. There have been revolutions. The computer revolution, there were jobs that were lost. The first industrial revolution, steam engine, there were jobs that were lost as well. And at present, we see, for example, many South Americans trying to enter the US through the Mexican border. Millions of them on foot going through the Darien Gap trying to go into the US. And different American governments react differently. Some let them in as asylum seekers, refugees, and process them. Others, like the Republican governments, particularly of Trump, restrict them heavily and try to build a wall. So Trump has not indicated that he wants to go and colonize Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Colombia, because these countries are sending refugees to America. You see, even though that has been ongoing for a very long time, because America has its own problems. So maybe you say with AI, America has solved a lot of problems with technology. Now there's a universal basic income because the robots are doing all the work. America has excess capacity and says, because you guys are trying to come in, let's conquer you. That could be an argument, but that assumes that number one, America has solved these internal problems enough for it to have so much excess capacity to go and try and solve problems outside.
They don't have to have solved it, because we just saw what happened in Congo and Rwanda and something. You just have to have one president who makes decisions. If they just have a...
The second assumption is that this will be permissible in the global community of nations. Now, when the first colonialism happened, there was no United Nations, there was no League of Nations, there was no united global voice, and there was no global legal regime to govern such operations. Now we have United Nations with this charter and Article 2.4, which says nations shall not use force in their pursuit of international relations. And we have an international criminal court, we have an international court of justice. We basically have systems that try to prevent other nations from conquering and taking over other countries. For example, when Russia entered Ukraine in February 2022, we have seen that the whole Western world has ganged up against Russia with sanctions and funding for Ukraine to defend itself. So it is no longer as easy for one country to say, let's go and conquer a bunch of countries. Other countries will stand up and try to defend. We can see Israel trying to take over Palestine, and much of the developing world and other parts of the world outside Europe and America are standing up in defense of Palestine. So it is no longer as easy as walking somewhere and conquering. There's over 195 member states of the UN now. all of whom have some sort of voice and are able to organize themselves.
Here's what I think is you're making the same assumption again that we talked about, which is the future will resemble the past. I'll give one example of what that kind of example is talking about. It's a well-known case in philosophy when you talk about, the problem of induction. They're talking about the Lasso's chicken, where a chicken, has made an assumption. The reason why the master keeps coming and feeding it, and then it is so that my master loves me so much. And you can just think about a goat, a cow, something. And that's why probably these animals are still domesticated. They assume we feed them because we love them. But of course, it's not about love. It's not about benevolence or something. It's about fattening so that they grow and then give us enough meat. So if you assume because your boss has come and feed you the first time, the second time, and the fourth time, even 100 times, and then the 50,000 times that you think is the same thing, you're just in for surprise. And that's what I'm talking about. We don't get the examples of the past and we assume it's going to be the same thing. That's the first case. The second case I'm making is that when you say that we have bodies of like European nations that they can come against that kind of idea. It's like you trust them so much. It's like you assume things will be on the same level as we are now. But just assume in the case where we have about the 30 millions of people who are very hungry. And they don't have this universal basic income that you're talking about. They are starving. They can't even, nation can say, okay, you sign a petition. Let's call Russia to come to colonize us because they have food, we don't have it. And 40 millions of people in a country of 45 vote, okay, let's invite these countries to come because at least for them they have food. Like it becomes democracy to come and colonize you because now citizens don't have what to eat. They have now voluntarily invited you. That's just in the case they have not migrated. Maybe there is no way the governments at home and destination have blocked them. That's a possibility. They said we are in the age of internet. They can invite their own enemies to come and colonize them. That's my second case I'm making. The third case is even though they say the nations that where we stay here now would say okay, let's block in advancement in AI to come in our countries. What happens is nations that are using AI start making cheaper products. Like you are producing a kilo of maize on 500, someone because he's using robots and all that advanced technology is producing it on 50 shillings. Which means if you were taking cotton or coffee or whatever as an export, you no longer have the capacity to sell it. You no longer have capacity to sell it because you just encounter people who are producing it much cheaper than you on the market. And then you have no choice. You can't sell anything. You can't buy anything because you don't have capacity. What do you have? You have no choice but to surrender yourself.
Well, again, that assumes that the powerful power wants to colonize you.
They do.
And that the people of the poor country are begging for colonization because
they can. What happens?
A rich country can help a poor country without colonizing.
Yes,
it's something called foreign aid.
Yeah.
If you read about the Marshall Plan, after Europe had been decimated in the Second World War, the US came up with a plan to help Europe rebuild, not by colonizing them, but by giving them free money to build infrastructure and come up. For the last 50 or so years, Europe and America have been giving Africa foreign aid for it to get off its feet, as opposed to coming back to recolonize. So, it can help through loans, through grants, not necessarily through saying, let's come and take you over, because perhaps coming to recolonize you is more costly than helping you in other ways. We saw that Italy failed to colonize Ethiopia twice, and we've seen that it is not as easy or as straightforward for a powerful country to try and conquer a weak country. We saw America failed to dominate Afghanistan for 20 years and had to step out. We saw Iraq, we saw Vietnam. So it is not as easy as 1, 2, 3. It may become costlier to try and dominate another country than
So
to
if I
just help
get you
them
wrong,
from a
if
distance.
I do believe in what you're saying, and in fact, if USA wanted to take over the world, they would have done it in the Second World War. But are we willing to gamble on that that's the case? That we can't trust them in a way that they cannot do it because they have the capacity to do it. We know that for sure. And the issue is like it's not the same thing as you we have been encountering. The demands become so high. It's not more. It's more than just giving them a few millions. It's more than because this time around the country has nothing to take out. It has to fully depend on them. And if you don't believe that these kind of demands or this kind of help they can come with their own kind of sort of colonialism that we maybe it may not come as it used to be, but colonization is most likely imminent. It's my own view. It's not that we don't have a way we can avoid that.
The shape and form will not be the same as the direct colonialism that was there. So now we have imperialism, for example, we have something called globalization, where we're all adopting the same rules, but these rules favor the powerful countries and corporations from the already developed countries. So yes, you could have some sort of domination taking a different form, but not the old form of boots on the ground and colonial administrators from a foreign country trying to take you over. I think that's very hard. And as we've seen, for example, Rwanda, which has some form of organization and advancement, trying to conquer their neighbor who's 100 times their size, and the whole world is coming up and saying, no, you cannot do that. So it is not as easy or straightforward for someone to go and step into another country and try to run things anymore with this technology and internet and social media. The cost of doing so is much higher than the reward. So powerful countries look for other ways.
I'm not willing to gamble on that honestly, and that's probably where we disagree. And it's not that I believe what you're saying is possible. After all, we even us here we are creative beings. We can anticipate that, and that's probably why we are having this kind of discussion, so that governments in Africa can wake up early. And there are many multiple ways that we can anticipate that from happening. But if we don't, I don't see how we can have because just imagine in case where you have no choice but to depend on someone, and after all, we have the younger generation probably who can help those kind of robots. They can clean them, they can what, as we say that they came because of labor, and we have the labor imprinted and in other continent. As we talk, we have the youngest population, which is the cause that brought them here, and we have it now. And those old people in Europe and all that, many people will help them to go to clinic, all those kind of things. So I do believe in what you're saying. There is a little chance that it may not happen. But I'm saying, as Africa, we should not sit and gamble that that's not the case. And in fact, here, let me even take it further. I am even saying that we can even have some sort of empires. Because as you see, big countries like USA, China, whatever, they are trying to learn to AI supremacy. And they assume that whoever attain AI supremacy first will definitely conquer the whole world. So, if that's the case, I even think not all the whole Europe, which will some European nations will find in the same situation as we are in Africa. But what I'm saying, I'm actually trying to even predict some sort of new empires or a global empire of some sort. Now they may be born out of that because they have had access to kind of the level of knowledge, the level of the resources that other nations cannot afford or do not have access to. And then therefore they see it as an opportunity. And by the way, where I may differ from most people, I don't even see it as necessarily bad because after all, me, I believe there should be superpower. I know people say they disagree with me on that, but I believe in every community of people, we do need someone who people can easily trust it. That's why we have one president. If we can have one president in the nation, we wouldn't have someone whom we look up to who can maintain morals of the global, landscape to stay straight. Maybe I'm not making this, but that's an assumption I'm making. I am not saying that it would necessarily come. In fact, probably we can even continue on discussing what should be the nations, should the nation of Africa do to avoid such kind of misfortune to before us, if we really are serious and we want to avoid it from happening. So I don't know what you have to say about, because maybe empires may come, some new sort of empires, or even colonization. And before we even go to the third level, I'm thinking we have a second reason why I believe uh, we may have, even if it is not AI, we once discussed a personal discussion, I told you about morals in Africa. And this is the argument I'm making. When I say morals in Africa, is that we have corrupt corrupt citizens, people who have corrupt morals, who can do anything. Someone who will not fear to kill someone. Like, just imagine in your neighborhood, someone kills you because you have a smartphone of probably $100, because they see you moving up with you at night and just punch you, you die because of something of $100. Just imagine someone who cannot beg for who cannot place on. So just imagine someone who cannot beg for a neighborly crossing the road, and then all of a sudden someone, like, they become the president of the nation. These are the kind of people whom, if we are in the or AI, like, once we have people who are poor and all that, these are the kind of people who can say, okay, give me 2 million, I'm going to give you the whole nation. You understand? And if the leader, probably you're saying like the Western nations may not be interested in doing that, yes, it's possible. But what if there is one who might develop that kind of? We can't predict the future. We can never do that. But for sure, I'm saying, because we have morals which are degrading over and over, we may adopt leaders who can do anything, including selling themselves to an external power. That's what I feel.
Well, you've conflated many issues on morality. I think Africans have some of the most upright morals. The problem with Africa is poverty. When you're poor and desperate, you'll do anything to survive, including throwing away all the values that you have. So this is a problem that can be fixed with giving people some sort of economic dignity. And on whether Africans and African leaders should just sit back because they are not afraid that they might be recolonized, I think you make a good point in that there's a chance, given Africa's current situation, that it is susceptible, prone to a recolonization. We were colonized in the first place because we were not united. We did not have strong enough weapons to defend ourselves. We are still not united. We do not have strong weapons to defend ourselves. When you imagine Shaka Zulu and his army with spears and shields and covering themselves in hides and skins, going against the British Army with cannons and Maxim guns. So now they have drones, they have fighter jets, and what do we have? So it is indeed possible that because Africa is still at a technological disadvantage, it is capable of being um, taken over by any power through any means, whether colonialism or imperialism. And the solution to that really is unity. Africans cannot continue considering themselves as 54 different units, which does not make sense because these countries did not exist before 1884 when the Berlin Conference happened. So Africa needs to think with one voice, to develop a defense mechanism to defend itself, a joint defense mechanism for all of Africa and not just a few countries. Because you might have a strong country or a good economy, like say Botswana or Mauritius or Seychelles. Those are too weak in the grander scheme of things. So you need a common strategy for Africans. I agree. And, this is one of the messages I preach, that Africa must unite or perish. This was the message of Kwame Nkrumah. So it's the message of the likes of Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara and Marcus Garvey and Franz Fanon and many others. The message has not gone away, and it is still relevant today as it was so many years ago. So, and on the last point you made of, you believe there must be a global policeman, one policeman who can settle conflicts and tell people what to do. What if this policeman is an evil policeman? So, what if this global power is evil? What if it's dictatorial? I believe more in a multilateralism and not a unilateralism. Instead of having one superpower, have many powers to check each other. If the US messes up, China can stand up against it. If China messes up, Russia will stand up. If Russia messes up, India. So that these powers can veto and check and hold each other in balance, as opposed to having one power with unchecked power to do what it can, including messing up.
Yes, that's a very valid point, that's for sure. But despite having many powers, we already have those many powers. But we also know that we have one power that is above them all. There can't be such kind of equal powers. That's not possible. So now that you also see that it's a possibility, probably we can't agree on a percentage. In my view, if we don't anticipate what we're talking about, there is like a 80% plus of chances that this might happen. Africa will find themselves on disadvantage of being colonized again, and that's where I stand. Probably
I think we can disagree on the percentage, but the likelihood is there.
Yeah, cool. So now let's talk about what should Africa like. You propose what you think is a theory that Africa may follow, and also come up with a different one. So what do you think Africa can do to be able to avoid such kind of things from happening, from like being colonized again? What probably like a 5 bullet points would you recommend?
Well, number one, Africa has to build up defenses. In order to do that, Africa has to be united, which is the most important thing. That all 55 governments of Africa need to find one common structure behind which to adopt. It could be a loose confederation like the European Union, where you have common currency, common borders and defense, and free movement within, but you have sovereign governments. Or it could be a tight union like the United States, where each state gives up their sovereignty to a common federation, and this federation takes care of defense, takes care of foreign affairs, takes care of taxation, and legislation, political decision, and the small units can take care of secondary matters like education and health and so on and so forth. So you have a centralized power. That I would vouch for the latter, which is similar to the United States or the USSR, or even Germany federation type, which is a tighter federation. But to get there, you could start with the former, which is looser, and then go on amalgamating slowly. So unity is paramount and is the most important. And once you've done that, then you can build a common joint standing army, you can build up defenses, you can be able to then also build infrastructure to build prosperity.
And that's where I'm saying, given what I talked about, like morality issues, if we don't have good morally sound leaders, they will be selfish and come their own personal interests.
True. And so you need one or two unselfish, selfless leaders who can beat the other leaders in line. Germany had Otto von Bismarck, who through pressure was able to forcefully unite the rest of the German states, some of which were not interested. When you look at Italy, it was also similar. So you don't need all of them to sync together. You need maybe 5 or 10 of them in the beginning, and and the rest will fall in line.
Okay, here is my view on what I think can be done. I don't know you completed, finished your point, but the first thing I think Africans, or like something that's very easy to do, starting with every nation. I'm suggesting every African nation, wherever they are, let them invest heavily in in their young people. By that I mean, like here, let's assume here in Uganda, you're in Uganda, you know a lot of startups that are doing a lot of amazing things. Probably they are building computer, whatever they're doing. If I know one is building some fish feeder, it's a very amazing product that can be able to sell um, globally, can make enough money that government can tax. Should that moment come where they have to get a UPI, this is a very good company that is making a lot of money that can be able to be taxed enough money to pay the UBIs. That's the critical number one step I think every African nation should do, to invest in their young people. And of course, they have to do it in a more streamlined way that they avoid the corruption, so that they don't invest in a dying ideas, or like where someone comes. It happens a lot in Africa, where someone comes and they say like giving governments giving grants. They say, okay, we're giving you 200 millions, but you're going to bag 20. At the time, you have got all these 200 millions because you are broke and you're hungry. You just take that 20. And of course, because you know you were supposed to get 200 and you're given 20, even that 20 will not be used for anything. That's a very common thing in Africa. At least I know you know that for sure. So if that has to happen, then they have to really work on the fact that they have to put up a very streamlined mechanism to invest in the very good, potentially able startups or ideas. They have to do it in the most elegant way. That's one. Two, invest heavily in education in a way that, like now, Africans should be proactive. It's weird how we have to wait for Western nations to come up with regulations, and then like for example, why don't we, for example, forge a new kind of a curriculum that allows people to use AI in class? Because in the future, it won't matter. After all, like at school, they may tell you it's not allowed to cheat, but in life, you are allowed to cheat. You're allowed to ask friends. You're allowed to lead, about a topic you don't like. Life will not put you on pressure that you don't have to ask. The issue is how efficient are you on your level of asking. So same learning or changing the education where they allow African children to, prosper and know how to use these tools as early as possible. Not an restricting. No one can come with a smartphone you can't come in a classroom with a smartphone, because if you come, you'll be cheating and all that. So that's something that governments in Africa should be able to do. So that we have people who grow up familiar with these tools, and then by that they may invest in, buying them smartphone or computers and all that, so that they know how to cheat in a proper way to find the right knowledge. Because after all, it's not about how much knowledge you have that matters in life. It's about how much good, or how good you are to find new knowledge. It's about how good you are to find new knowledge. That's something that governments can invest in. Three, every individual family, wherever they are, wherever you or whatever, like every family, they start with their children. They teach them good morals. They understand the basics of morals, and how you need to live good with other people, so that you can live in what way you leave a smartphone here, and you sure you will find it back. When you have greedy people, it's very hard to have a prospering world. And how can that happen? The government can enforce that by establishing a very sound rule of law. Let every crime really be. Of course, the spirit of laws is not about punishing people, it's about guiding people. So, establishing a rule of law, you don't have to say, okay, someone who has been caught hawking is given now a whole year in prison. That's not useful at all. It's about giving them lenient punishments and then teaching them the love of a country. Then they understand why they should be moral. They should be good citizens in their land. And once we have that, we have morals. We have rule of law, which is a fourth point, and the fifth point is really establishing democracy. Let the people have a word to say. Let them have a way to vote for their ideas and all that. Like democracy is not the best. It's not the best, but this in the known sort of governments, the governance is the best known so far. Probably someone like you, anyone who loves the politics and that, can come up with another new theory of governing people. But for now, democracy is a very good way.
It's not the best except for all the others that have been tried.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's what we'll say. Yeah. So those 5 points are what I would recommend, as me personally, that every nation in Africa should start establishing. And of course, once we have moral people are not selfish, it's very easy to unite people who are not selfish. It's very easy to call them and say, let's come together, because everyone is putting a friend, like they're thinking about, as an ecosystem, not as a selfish personal ambitions. It's easy to unite such kind of people when everyone is focused on one simple goal. That's my thinking.
Well, you make very good points, and I would gladly use them if I was the president of an African country, except that the current leaders do not think the same way, and because you have too many different African countries. A nice dream to have, but when you wake up, you realize that it is hard to realize in the real world unless you get these governments to talk together, or you have some sort of stronger governments to push others to do what is right. So I still think by coming together, and there have been efforts through regional communities like ECOWAS, East Africa Community, SADC, and so on, which have not yet succeeded, and then the African Union. I think that coming together is much better than trying to do it piecemeal and then hopefully coming together. That could take another 100 years or longer. But if we had strong enough leaders take power who have the determination to do what you've said, then that would be a very fantastic thing to do, except it is highly unlikely.
We can start with what you and I can do, probably is, talk about it. And there's also something probably that would be a topic of someday. Like, I think another thing that probably could be the sixth point would be to establish the foundation of good families, like a lot of marriages in what. Because when we have sound marriages, we have good children, and then we have good communities, and we have good suburbs, and we have good countries. So, like, nations also investing a lot of thoughts and in shaping how marriages come together, and all that is something I think is worth considering in the long term.
Absolutely. Reshaping the cultural and social foundation of Africans. We did have a foundation before. Colonialism turned it upside down, and now imperialism and globalization, Africans do not know who they are anymore. We have foreign names, we have foreign practices, we dislike our heritage and our culture. We basically like a tree without a root. So being able to find ourselves again. Who are we? Where do we come from? What are we trying to accomplish? These are very important values, and this can be inculcated at the family level, at schools, through art and culture and entertainment. There's so many ways to move this message, but it is necessary. Again, it has to be organized in a coherent way, and there has to be some sort of common voice of saying, this is what we want to be. For example, Japan kept its culture for over 2,000 years, even though technology came and other countries came. The Japanese are still united as one people. The Chinese were able to find their culture again and use it to build a strong power. So we can do that, but we need some sort of thinkers or philosophers to sort of codify these practices, and then an administration that can move them forward. The Chinese have Confucianism, which is based on an early philosopher called, Confucius. So who are Africa's Confuciuses? Who are our thinkers? The Western world bases on the Greco-Roman philosophies from 2,000 years ago. From Athens and the democracy of Greece, and the practices in Rome, or Christianity, it is anchored in these values. What are the African values? What is the African religion? What is the African cultural ethos? How can we codify it into a text and spread it?
Well, I think that's another topic for another day, considering that I disagree on some of the things you spoke, like culture and all that, and religion, African religions and all that. I do believe, and though some are all ideas are worth considering, we can always, because if we tend to keep on looking back, we may be a static, cultural society where we don't make good progress. And so I do believe that we do need to have some sort of progressive culture that adjusts, that grows just like anything that has life, in other words, that adapts according to situations, but always keeping the core spirit of that culture. Anyways, that, my friends, that was Africa being recognized versus not being recognized. I was with my friend Donald Massas here. Did I pronounce it right? So, thank you very much. You make sure you subscribe, like, and share this show. I'm very sure you really got informed from history, philosophy, and all that. Thank you so much. See you. Ciao, ciao.